Okay, I have to be really, really careful with this video. Fixed is kind of a miracle, mainly because it was never supposed to happen. It was almost doomed due to Warner Brothers dropping it, but Netflix saved it. If you want to hear more about the history of the movie, go check out my previous video on Fixed. And you're probably thinking, I originally wrote this in a way where I mocked the fact that I was making two Fixed videos in a row, but that didn't happen, so I'm not going to mention it. As I said in that previous video, I'll go into the grueling wait I endured for this trailer, because holy hell. Like with K-pop Demon Hunters, there was only a month until the film released when it got its official trailer. Even then, the most we got of Fixed were a couple of screenshots, and that was it. I had to resort to leaks in order to see how great the animation potentially was. And after days and days of nothing, July 17th hit, and that glorious teaser hit YouTube, and shock, shock, surprise, surprise, it was a bad trailer. As I said, I wouldn't let the poor trailers ruin my overall thoughts of the movie, because this was being made by animation legend Genndy Tartakovsky, who has actually made real adult animation, so this wouldn't be a giant loss. But now that the film is finally released, which I accidentally woke up at 6:30 in the morning for because it was supposed to premiere on Netflix at 8, but God, I was on my goddamn side, so I was supposed to wake up at 7:45, and the reason I woke up so late was because I was going to watch this film on my phone, because there's no way I'll be caught watching this film on TV. Wait, what was I talking about? Now that the film was finally released, was everyone right in saying this film was bad, or were my hopes fulfilled? Spoilers for the entire movie, by the way. Just skip to the end if you want to know the rating. The film follows Bull, a blue Staffordshire Bull Terrier, I think, the Wikipedia page keeps changing the choice of what dog he is, who has a fondness for his balls. However, this gets him in trouble with his owners, and they decide to have him neutered, not wanting to lose his nuts, and the one chance to confess his love to his next-door neighbour, Bourgeois, I think that's how you pronounce it, Honey. Bull runs away and sets out with his friends, including sensitive boxer Rocco, wannabe Dash and Fetch, and nervous and dumb Jack Russell Terrier Lucky, to use his ball sack as much as possible before the inevitable arrives. I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for this review, due to the fact that I'm defending a movie that has been outright despised by a large majority of people. And in the back of my mind, I was hoping I would have given it a rating in the 7 area, just so I wouldn't get slack for giving it a higher 8 rating than K-pop Demon Hunters, which is the most loved animated movie of the year thus far. With that said, I kind of loved it. And don't get me wrong, it isn't a high amount of love because I still do have problems. My biggest issue is, obviously, the writing. There's a large magnitude of sex jokes in this movie, and it gets old pretty quick. Plus, there are some moments in the film that made me very, very, very uncomfortable. Like the dog orgy, these 2 random dogs that go at it in the middle of a park, a disgusting close-up of a female dog's nipples, and the ending, where a bear flashes its giant sack all over the screen. I could list more, but I won't. However, it wasn't as, shocking or grotesque as I was expecting it to be. Originally, I was confused as to why this film had a 15 rating here in Ireland, but now that I've seen the film, I can kind of see why. The graphic and extreme nature of the film is nowhere near as bad as something like Fritz the Cat, but it is still a hell of a lot worse than Sausage Party. I'll get to my criticisms of and comparisons to that movie in a bit. The story could also be a bit weak and predictable sometimes. Like the whole film, it feels like a run-on sentence. And then they, and then they, and then they. Like it just doesn't feel that wholly cohesive. However, the most important question remains, is the film actually funny? Well, the trailers made it seem like it was a generic adult animated comedy slop. However, to my not surprise, listening to the reviews from Annecy and Fantasia worked, because while this film's writing isn't 100% funny, some banter between the characters and especially the physical comedy can get really damn hilarious. I know this will probably sound a bit sick and depraved and horrible. But as a fan of dark comedy, I know people have a lot of that excuse, but since I'm a fan of dark comedy, I can technically get away with saying this. I think, maybe, I don't know the ground. But anyways, there's a scene in the middle when a cute and tiny dog is rescued by the main characters and then is ruthlessly run over by a car, and the middle of his body is just completely crushed and bloody. I'm sorry, but the sudden, shocking nature of it just cracks me the hell up. I think whenever the film just goes ruthlessly mean-spirited, it gets the biggest laughs. The film is labeled as a dark comedy Wikipedia for the longest time, and it definitely fits, because the meanest jokes are by far the funniest. The score is also great, being composed by Tyler Bates, and all of it has the 70s disco funk sound to it that makes it sound more unique and fun. The characters are my second favourite thing about the movie. They're all great, especially Honey, who is by far my favourite character. I like how she wasn't made to be the boring token girl character who has no personality. She has tons of personality, mainly in how raunchy, provocative, and horny her character is. I mean, everyone is, but her specifically is a lot. It makes her scenes all the funnier. Bull is a good protagonist and he has a good arc, and I like how the film gets done with his breakup with his friends very quickly. There's no third act breakup at the ending. I like that. It's smarter than most animated kids movies, but again, this is still Fix we're talking about. Speaking of which, his friends are also great. Rocco, Fetch, and Lucky are all incredibly likable and charming. In fact, Lucky also has a good arc of learning how to discover his true feelings, and it leads to a great scene with an intersex dog named Frankie. The bit that directly precedes it is questionable, but they're still a likable duo. Sterling is also a great antagonist. Even if the writing isn't all that funny, the delivery of the voice acting helps it greatly. Adam Devine, Idris Elba, Catherine Hahn, Fred Armisen, Beck Bennett, Bobby Moynihan, and River Gallo all knock it out of the park. They're never annoying, which is impressive considering what they're given to work with. However, by far the best aspect of this movie is the animation. Holy hecking dog balls, the animation is beautiful. The backgrounds are beautiful, the lighting is excellent, the designs are unique and great, but the main character here is definitely the character animation. It is so expressive, fast-paced, and beautifully done to the point of rivaling some Disney movies. This is definitely a movie budget, if I've ever seen it, for a 2D animated film. Yeah, it doesn't have shading, but we'll take what we can get in the modern world of 2D animation, which is in the film sense is basically dead in mainstream. This film and the Looney Tunes film that came out last year are mainly the reasons why 2D still remains my personal favourite animation form. If Fixed had been a 3D movie, which it almost was, the whole film would collapse in on itself. Tartakovsky said in an interview that if the film wasn't 3D, then the dog balls would look disgusting. I mean, they do in this film as well, but, would have looked even more disgusting according to him. I'm glad Tartakovsky didn't give in to the executives and actually did it the way he wanted. I also love how sometimes the film has a shaky cam. Doing shaky cam in an animated movie, let alone a 2D one, is incredibly difficult, so I'm happy to say it's done well here. It makes the film stand out a bit from other 2D animated movies. Seriously, I just can't get over how fluid the animation is. The animators outdid themselves here. Wish I could show any of it, but YouTube. Anyways, time to talk about something that has already been talked about to death. Ever since this film was announced, people have been comparing it to both Sausage Party and Strays. I can see why someone would think that, and I won't stop people from thinking these things. However, me personally, I won't compare this to either of those two, especially Sausage Party. Mainly because Sausage Party is much worse than this movie in almost every conceivable way, especially in terms of comedy and characters. The characters in Sausage Party are either annoying, pointless, racial stereotypes, or all three. The comedy is also horrible in Sausage Party. It relies on the whole cartoon character swearing thing too much. Like, there's 180 uses of the F word in that goddamn movie. 75 in the first 22 minutes. Yes, I counted. And this movie's 89 minutes in total. Fixed at least has some restraint. By my count, the film only has 55 F words throughout the entire thing. So, it's a very big difference. However, one of the good things about Sausage Party was that I commented on corrupt religion and thinking for yourself, which you did really well. Fixed also has something to comment on. The ethics of dog pageant shows, and it's a thing. I think it's a good commentary, and doesn't hit you in the head with it. It's kind of, but I mean, to be fair, it's also kind of glossed over. But you know, at least it's something in this movie. Another film Fixed has been compared to is Strays, which makes sense considering, well, what do you think? They're both about dogs doing raunchy things. The big difference is that Strays is going in that more sausage party route of, it looks like it's for kids, but it isn't. Fixed isn't trying to pretend it's for kids. Its contents are very much explicitly adult, where Sausage Party and Strays are trying to pretend to be for kids on the outside, which is an extra layer of comedy it needs to accomplish. For this film, it doesn't feel, at least to me, like it's trying to be like, these dogs say the F word, isn't that funny? The fact that there are only 55 F words in the whole thing makes the swearing more natural feeling and open and not as constant. It makes it feel like this is how the characters would actually talk, not as if they're trying to extend the F word count in order to make it feel more adult. In conclusion, Fixed isn't perfect. Far from it. The writing can be a bit weak, there are some moments that are uncomfortable, the story is sometimes predictable and feels very one-note. However, the film is greatly saved by some great dark humor, likable and charming characters, fantastic animation, a great score, unique cinematography for an animated film, and interesting themes and messages. Overall, this film very much isn't for everyone. Hell, I can't stand films like it. However, thanks to great direction, a dead on arrival concept can be saved and turned into something that stands out amongst the crowd. Sausage Party tried to be the modern day Fritz the Cat and crashed and burned. Fixed is very much deserving of being called the current generation's Fritz. Not in terms of themes, but also, you know, the fact that it's an adult animated movie. That is very extreme. It's definitely on the theme, because Fritz the Cat dealt with themes of, you know, political issues and all that. But that's a story for another day. 8 out of 10. And once again, I have to reiterate. If you call me, other people like this movie, or the makers of the film Zoophiles, you are a dumbass. You're also a dumbass if you say that this film is the reason Inside Job was cancelled, and worse than Cuties. If you still can't understand that, then you have the same intelligence level as insert American politician here. Which one? Any of them.